Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot tell you how excited I am and pleased to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Marianne Wanamaker, as the Dean of the Howard W. Baker Jr. School of Public Policy and Public Affairs at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And she's not only an authority in multiple fields, but she's also the right person to guide us as we fulfill our mission to serve the children of the world, especially in our centennial year. She is also a professor of economics at the University of Tennessee, a research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research, and a research fellow both at the Institute of Labor Economics and at the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa. She is a summa cum laude graduate of Vanderbilt University, where she was a member of Phi Beta Kappa. And in 2009, she completed her doctoral work after having received a master's at Northwestern University, and she served on the faculty at the University of Tennessee ever since. Her background is impressive. She is the former chief domestic economist at the White House Council of Economic Advisors, where she also served as the senior labor economist. Additionally, she is a former member of the Federal Workforce Policy Advisory Board and an associate consultant for Bain & Company in Boston, where she worked on healthcare and retail teams. Her research interests are comprehensive and include labor economics and workforce development, education, American economic history, and demography. Her work has been profiled in the Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic, and the Washington Post, among other major outlets. Additionally, she has publications in the Quarterly Journal of Economics, the Journal of Labor Economics, American Economic Journal Applied, the Journal of Public Economics, the Journal of Economic History, and Exploration in Economic History. Dr. Wanamaker has been awarded grants by the prestigious National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, and additional public and private funders that are supportive of her research. She is the co-recipient of the Kenneth J. Arrow Award for her work on the Tuskegee study, which was named by the International Health Economics Association as the very best paper in health economics published in the entire year 2018. In addition to her scholarly research record, Dr. Wanamaker has been the recipient of several college and university level teaching awards, including UT's prestigious Alexander Prize. She regularly teaches PhD, undergrad, and MBA level courses on economics and business ethics at the University of Tennessee, and she is a well-respected faculty member who I will tell you, I know, is praised by her students for her creativity and her innovative teaching style. Recently, the Tennessee General Assembly designated the Baker School as the Center for Promoting Civics Education throughout the entire state of Tennessee. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are thrilled to have Dr. Wanamaker to provide an update on the Baker School, which is truly a Tennessee treasure. Kiwanians, please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. I confirmed with Jared that we sent Mary Lee a very short bio. So she did her research and her homework. Okay, so if you're an academic, you have to list all that stuff on your website, or otherwise other academics don't take you seriously. So in any case, it's really a pleasure to be here. You might wonder why an economist is about to talk to you about civic education, and that's a great question. I've had a left turn in my career over the last 3 years. I spent a year in Washington, D.C. from 2017 to 2018 as Mary Lee mentioned. I was quite happy as an academic economist when I went up there, but I was very unhappy as an academic economist when I got home. And I couldn't quite fit back into my old job after I had just spent a year doing something that really felt, to me, quite significant. And so I asked the University of Tennessee, I just said, I need y'all to give me something to do. And my old job isn't it. And so the chancellor, I don't know, how many of you are UT alums? Okay, so you know our great chancellor. And she's as impatient as I am. And so she said, okay, I have an idea. There's this center on campus that's named for Howard Baker. It's got 8 people and a small set of programs. It needs to be doing something different. Can you just go do something with it? I said I'd be happy to. So that was 2.5 years ago. We went from 8 people to 42 people in 2.5 years, which if you have led an organization, you can imagine just all of the growing pains that come with that. We've got all of them, but I also have now a team that can execute a big vision. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is the big vision that is now living at the Baker School. Before I do that, I want to say a little bit about kind of where we are in higher ed, because it feels like the elephant in the room. And I'm being live streamed, so I'm going to be very careful about how I say this. Universities like the University of Tennessee are not trying to be a leading university. And what I mean by that, and the chancellor says this better than I will, but we're not trying to rise in the rankings to meet the Harvards and the Columbias and the Princetons of the world. That's not our job. It's not our mission. Our job is to be a university that leads the state that is the source of our being. We are a land-grant institution. We're here to serve the state of Tennessee. And our metrics are how well did we do that, not how well are we regarded in a national ranking. And I want to, just thinking about what's going on in higher ed this week, and really has been going on for the last several years, is that it's really of very little cultural significance what happens at Columbia University every day. It is of great cultural significance what happens at the University of Tennessee every day. We just are different organizations with very different missions and very different impacts. And I don't want that to get lost in what's going on your televisions at home or on the pop-ups on your phones. So I'm happy to answer, take questions about that later on. But I just want to remind that we're different institutions. We have different missions. And the impact of us, I think, is different. And I'm saying that coming as someone who graduated from 2 private institutions. The impact at Northwestern and Vanderbilt will never be what it is at the University of Tennessee. It just won't. And so if you're a UT alum, I hope you're really proud of your university. If you're not really proud, something's not quite right, because there really is a ton of really good work going on there every single day, and a lot of people who are committed to that work. And I think I'm not a UT alum. Some days I wish I were, because it really is, it's a place that deserves your pride. So with that, is there a way to dim? Yeah, there you go. Okay, thank you. I should have tested this before I started, but we'll see if it works. Okay, so first of all, I'll just say if you've been to Knoxville, you might recognize this building. So this is the Baker School at the very kind of forefront northwest corner of campus. It's the entrance to campus for many people off of Cumberland Avenue. And it's the Baker Center is 20 years old. The building is 15 years old. The school is 9 months old. Okay, so what's the difference between a Baker Center and a Baker School? So a school grants degrees and has its own faculty. A center does not do that. So what we've been up to for the last year and a half is sorting out what do we want to be delivering in terms of academic content? Who do we want our students to be? What do we want them to learn? What's going to make the most impact for the state of Tennessee? And we're known and named for this guy, Howard H. Baker Jr. from Huntsville, Tennessee, who began his career in public service as a candidate for office. He ran for Senate the first time in 1964 and lost. He was an old school East Tennessee Republican at a time when the entire state was full of Democrats. There had been no Democrat elected to a statewide office in Tennessee since 1925. And so when he ran in 1964, he was going to be the first. And people in Knoxville tell this story, which is probably not quite as funny if you don't know the people involved. But a gentleman named Jim Haslam, founder and CEO of Pilot Oil, was his campaign chair in 1964. And he was several weeks into raising money for Howard Baker's U.S. Senate campaign when he realized that he was running for the U.S. Senate and not the state Senate. That is how unlikely a candidate he was. Okay, so he was young, and it was just extremely unlikely that a Republican was going to win. He did lose in 1964. He ran again in 1966 and won. He became a majority leader. He became minority leader and then majority leader in the Senate. He retired from the Senate after 3 terms, and then Ronald Reagan asked him to come back and be White House Chief of Staff, which he agreed to do. And when he did that, he brought with him 2 UT alumni as sort of chief deputies in the White House, one as press secretary and one as White House counsel. So there was a moment in time where all of the decisions in the White House were being made by Ronald Reagan and 3 UT alums, which I think is pretty stunning. He was then U.S. ambassador to Japan and came back in 2005 and then died in 2014. And I'm going to talk more about Baker's legacy in a minute, but anybody in the room knew him, met him along the way? Yeah, there's always somebody. In every room, somebody knew Howard Baker. So if you get a chance, ask the folks who just raised their hand what he was like, because I think you'll get an interesting piece of information. All right, so the Baker School, as I said, is 9 months old. And one of the things you do when you start a new organization is you try to figure out your messaging. Okay, Senator Alexander says you get the talk right. Okay, he used to say that at the beginning of any campaign that he was entering. He would say, step 1 is get the talk right. What are you trying to say to people? So we did a lot of research and a lot of surveys of our own undergrads trying to understand what would it be that would bring an 18, 19, 20-year-old into a place like the Baker School that is here to educate them in public policy, public affairs, civics. How can we message that to an 18-year-old to get them interested? Okay, so if you think that's a hard question, it is a super hard question. And here's what we learned. The first thing we learned is you can't call it the School of Government. They will not show up if you call it the School of Government. So we asked them, you know, we're deciding, should we call it the Baker School of Government or should we call it the Baker School of Public Policy? And they said, do not call it government. We said, okay, do you know what public policy is? They're like, no, but it's better than government. So we're like, okay, so it is the Baker School of Public Policy and Public Affairs for that reason. But we still needed, so we have a name, we still need a slogan, right? A thing that kind of gets you and grips you and makes you want to be there. All right, and so we worked through a bunch of different versions of this, and the one that we landed on in the end was be part of the solution. And the reason we did that is that if you study UT undergrads, and you look at, every one of them takes a what's called a Clifton Strengths Assessment when they come in at UT, and it teaches them about their own strengths. What are you good at? And then we use those over the course of their 4 years to help them lean into the things that they're good at. And so the number one strength of UT undergrads is problem solving. That's what they're best at. And so if we can figure out a way to frame public policy and public service as problem solving, we'll be in a much better position, right, than if we frame it as something else. For example, this is a generation that is very averse to conflict. I know you don't think that they are, but they really are. They don't want to fight. So if I framed it as get in there and win for your side, they're not coming, right? And so we were very intentional about how we phrased what it looks like to be in policy and politics. And our phrasing has been be part of a solution, be a public problem solver. Okay, and I'm going to come back to that. So I'm going to walk through kind of 4 strategic goals that we have at the Baker School and then share a little bit about how we're trying to address those issues. So number 1, and the most kind of basic fundamental role of an institution like ours is we got to be graduating students into public service. That's our real goal. So what we're doing then is dramatically expanding the university's capacity to do that. But we're not doing it without a set of kind of core values. So the great, great, great benefit of being named after Howard Baker is that you can say, yes, we're graduating undergrads with a degree in public policy, but they're going to be rooted in the same set of values that Howard Baker held, right? Which are not partisan values, right? So those values and those principles are these three. Number one, every student who comes through the Baker School will have had a set of experiences that we believe will restore their confidence in our own institutions. You've probably seen the survey numbers about how many 18 to 22-year-olds would be willing to throw democracy out the window and try some other system. It's a majority, more than 50%. Okay? So we feel like part of our job is to restore their confidence in the system that they have. Number two, and this is classic Howard Baker. He had a phrase that said, never forget that the other fella might be right. We don't use fella. We say you might be right. But the idea of intellectual humility, that is an important part of being a leader, is to understand that you're not always going to have the right answer and somebody else might have it every once in a while. Okay, so that idea of have your positions, but also listen to what the other person is saying, because it could be that they're right about this. And then the third principle, the third Baker principle, was the art of the possible. Baker was known as the great conciliator. He was the person in Washington who resolved a lot of conflict, both within his caucus and between Republicans and Democrats. For example, he found common ground to establish the Clean Air and Clean Water Act. It's a good example of that. He managed to get the Panama Canal approved. You raise your hand if you remember that moment in American history. Okay, so Baker ultimately probably gave up the opportunity to be president over that issue, but he felt like Jimmy Carter was right and decided he was going to get Republicans on board with the Panama Canal, which he did. Right? And so the third piece of their training is about how do you get to common ground on issues even when people are really far apart? How can you find the things on which they will or can agree? So all of this is very intentionally built into the curriculum at the Baker School. In the fall of 2024, which is just a few months away, we'll launch our undergraduate major. We've recruited incoming freshmen to UT, and current freshmen at UT who will be sophomores next year have been recruited into this major. We have 50 students as of right now, as of this morning, which is great. And they're going to learn they're going to go through a kind of a core course sequence together in government, civics, politics, economics, data analysis, and communication. We feel like that's what you've got to know, these 6 things to be effective in solving public problems, right? So if you're interested in homelessness, you're interested in national security, you're interested in the environment, whatever you're interested in, if you don't understand those 6 things, you're not going to be very successful in solving a problem in that space. And then students have an opportunity to choose a concentration area that matches their interests, and that's all listed on the right-hand side. And so we really feel like we're adding ag policy and education policy, and once we've done that, we really feel like that pretty much covers the gamut of what they might end up doing in public service and public roles. And we're relying on expertise from all over UT's campus to fill out that curriculum. It's a really, really rich set of options for undergrads. And then we're serving students who aren't majoring in public affairs as well. So we have 3 minors for students who are majoring somewhere else on campus. And then undergraduate certificates, which are really like kind of very short 3 or 4 course sequences. And so every undergrad at UT has an opportunity to earn a certificate in American civics. Right? And so what I want to say back to communities like yours, groups like yours, is that when you are evaluating candidates who come out of higher ed and they are coming into your organizations and they're applying to be an accountant or an engineer or a nurse or whatever, you should ask them, what do you know about American government? Do you know anything about civics? Did you take a civics class in college, right? Did you spend some of your time, you have 120 hours in college, which is 40 courses. Did you spend one of those 40 courses better understanding your own country? I think that's a really good question to ask somebody who's coming to work for you. Because the truth is that in order to get things done in any organization, you do eventually have to intersect with government at some level. That's probably why many of you are here, right? And so we're giving UT students an opportunity to dig into that in the hopes that that will actually give them a leg up in the labor market in the long run. Okay, let me talk a little bit about what we're doing for adult learners. So part of our mandate has been to build coursework for people who are already in public roles. So people who are already serving, there are many in this room who are doing this, who are serving as mayors or city managers or elsewhere in our state and local governments, and haven't been fully educated to the level that they need to be able to do their jobs most effectively. Right, and so we have a master's in public policy that is in person and a master's in public administration that's in person, and then in the fall will also be online. And then we've built a number of graduate certificates, and you'll notice energy policy, nuclear policy, national security. This area of focus really is reflective of where East Tennessee is right now. Okay, we're very much in the middle of the country's energy, national security, and really nuclear energy conversation. I don't know if you feel it in Kingsport the way we feel it in Knoxville, but nobody can stop talking about small modular nuclear reactors in Knoxville. It's like every single day, that's all I hear about. So it's really a big part of the economic development strategy for this governor and for East Tennessee in general is around energy technology and the energy future. So we're trying to make sure that we're standing in that lane and serving the state well with those courses. Okay, all right, so this is the part that I really want to talk to you about, because this is the part you're really going to care about. When we decided to build the Baker School, at the same time that that's going on and we're trying to figure out what we want that to look like, the state legislature is having a conversation about establishing a civics institute in the state of Tennessee. And they decided to establish it at the University of Tennessee. It comes with a $4 million a year appropriation from the state legislature, which is a huge amount of money to get something done with, okay? And they were going to put it at UT, and they raised the question, like, would y'all want it at this new Baker School? We were like, yes, we would want it at the new Baker School, especially when it was passed through the state legislature with fully bipartisan support. There are lots of civics institutions across the country in public higher ed institutions that were passed with only Republican votes. It has happened in every other state. Ours is the only one that came out of the legislature with a bipartisan vote. So we're super proud of that. It's a great foundation on which to stand, because you can say to students, like, this is not a partisan thing. We're here to serve all of you. So the Institute of American Civics came to live with us about 2 years ago. You're looking at two former governors of the state of Tennessee, both of whom sit on the board of that institute, along with 10 other people, including the Chancellor of Vanderbilt. They're in it with us, and a bunch of other people, a couple folks from Harvard and others who are trying to help us generate or create an institution that can really serve the state well. And I'm going to tell you a few things about what we're doing in that institute that I hope eventually we'll be able to share with people even outside of UT Knoxville campus. So I'm going to skip this. These are the depressing numbers about Americans and how they feel about democracy. We'll just skip that for today. Y'all just eaten. We can just go right through it. Okay, so let me just talk about a few things that we're doing in the Institute. So one is that we're just doing the basic work of teaching civics, which doesn't happen very often on college campuses. Okay, and so the Institute 101 class is citizenship. What is citizenship? What does it mean? How do you behave when you're a good citizen, right? What is required of you? What are your responsibilities? We're teaching about the Constitution, okay? Literally a semester-long course about the Constitution and the debates that went into it and the compromises that are inherent in it. We're teaching about the institutions of American government, how various parts of our government are working, the history of public problem solving. How did we get to where we are on education policy or on environmental policy or any other thing that kind of defines our public discussion right now? How did we get here? We didn't just land here. We kind of start with the Constitution and move our way forward. We're building civic skills And so I want to highlight two things in that category. One is that we're running a summer camp for high school teachers of civics, government, and history who are coming to Knoxville and spending 2 or 3 days with us. And last year we had 50 or so teachers who came for that. This year we're expecting closer to 80. And y'all, they had the best time. They just loved being together, finding people from all over the state who shared their interests and their passions and their struggles. It's really hard to be a high school teacher in civics and government right now. Super hard, right? Everybody's after you. Nobody thinks you're doing it right. It's just not fun. And so to have them there and be able to be together and get some kind of professional development from us, but also learning from each other, that was really the magic. And Senator Alexander, who's been an important part of what we're doing in the last couple of years, came to have dinner with them one night. And he said, I just want you to know that you're the most important people in the country. And you could just see them all melt, right? But he wasn't kidding. I mean, he really believes that, and he's not wrong. What they do in high schools is actually the thing that might save us from whatever is coming next. And so anyway, we're really proud of that program. It's been a really good thing. That network of teachers is now sending us their students, so it's also a recruitment tool. So it's worked out super well. The other thing that we're doing is we're exhibiting for campus what it looks like to have difficult conversations on tough topics. So public institutions like the University of Tennessee do adhere to free speech principles. That's what we do every single day. Private institutions do not have to do that. Okay, some of them have chosen to do that, but they do not have to do that. Public institutions are the only ones that are, by law, required to hold that principle on campus. And part of the way that we have done that at UT and encourage that is through the Baker School, by getting two people to come to campus who disagree with each other, right? And then exhibiting that kind of constructive, healthy debate for our entire campus community. That's part of our mission. And then the third bucket of work that the Institute is doing is that we're really trying to promote constructive civic engagement among our undergraduates. All right, and I said constructive. So you might think about this generation as a generation that wants to solve problems, and they want to solve them fast and by their rules. Okay? So the way we have approached this is to say the reason they want to solve problems fast and by their rules is that they don't trust the democratic process to solve problems. That's why they do it this way. Okay? It's not that they're impatient. It's that they don't have faith in the system through which American problems are solved. They don't have faith in that. And so they choose other avenues, okay? Protest, whatever you might choose. And not that protest is not an important part of the American democratic process. It is, okay? But the hard work of changing things happens through institutions like city council, county commission, school board, state legislatures, etc. So we have a program that we call Local Government Fellows, where we pay undergrads to go to city council meetings. All right, and that might sound crazy. They're not going to go if you don't pay them. So that's observation number one. If you do pay them, they'll go. Now, you can't pay them to get interested. But what we've learned is that after they sat through a couple city council meetings and it was kind of interesting and fiery and people got upset with each other, then they were kind of hooked. There's a lot of drama in city council. I'm looking at the mayor. Like, there can be a lot of drama in city council. But I think the real reason that they love this program, okay, and the real reason they love it, I think, is that city council has two things going for it. Any local government body like that has two things going for it that don't happen on the federal stage. Okay, number one, there's an agenda, and you start at the beginning and you end at the end, and you don't go home until you're done. That does not happen in Nashville. That does not happen in DC. All right, and the other thing they love is that you address your lawmakers directly. You take the floor and the microphone. That does not happen in Nashville, and that does not happen in DC. And I don't think that's not the education they got in high school, right? They didn't get the, like, listen, if you want to make an impact, go to your city council meeting, sign up for open commentary, right, and stand up and say your piece of mind. That's where the action happened. They didn't get that lesson. And so when they go and watch what's happening, and then they can they don't participate. If they're part of this program, they're not allowed to comment, okay? So they're there as observers. But they have really loved it. They have really loved it. And the big takeaway for them has been that they've gotten involved in local candidate races. They found people on city council that they really admire because of the way that they function, and they have said, how can I help you, right? And we think that's amazing. So we're really, really, really proud of that program, and that's something that we would definitely encourage you to think about how you might facilitate something like that here. How could Kiwanis be part of a program that encourages high school students to go to these meetings? We've also learned that it's important that they have a place to debrief. So it's not just going, they also need to kind of have somebody work with them on the back end. For us, it's Bill Lyons, who works with them on the back end and helps them understand kind of the finer points of what happened in that meeting. But it is a super successful program. That has also generated a ton of interest from them in working in local internships. So we have facilitated a lot, them being in the mayor's office or whoever in the city and the county government and even the school board. And that's been really good for them too. They have loved it. Kids who might otherwise have not considered a career in government, so to speak, have been converted. That is a rewarding place to work. Okay, I just want to say, one other thing, which is that these two gentlemen right here, about 2 years ago, I asked them if they'd be willing to host a podcast on our behalf. And they foolishly said yes. And in retrospect, I am 1,000% sure that they both wish I'd just asked them for $1 million because they are working like dogs. We're planning season 5. We've been through 4 seasons. They mostly record in studio with remote guests, but not always. And so we have shown up in various places with these two guys to record a live podcast, and it is magic. They are so good. So if you're not listening, I would encourage you to do so. The last season, the one they just finished up this spring, was about kind of constitutional issues, like foundational issues to the country, the Electoral College, primary elections, like the basic stuff, right? And it's not often that I sit in their things and learn something I really didn't know, but this season I learned a ton of stuff I didn't know about how our own government works. So I would really encourage you to listen to the most recent season because I do think it's fantastic. In the fall, they're going to tackle polarization. They're going to do a whole season on the polarization of Americans. Okay. These are our students with the Knoxville City Mayor when they showed up. We also had, I have to tell you this little story and then I'll wrap up and answer questions. But we've had some demonstrations in our city council meeting recently about the Gaza conflict. And so there was a meeting a few weeks ago where the room was completely full, overflowing, and they shut the doors and said, we can't let anybody else in. And that they shut the doors at 30 minutes before the start time of the city council meeting. Well, our 30 kids were not there 45 minutes early. So when they got there, they were like, doors are closed. And so they said, they're like, well, we're the kids from UT. And they're like, oh, okay. And they snuck them around the back and found a way for them to get in. So even the local police know these kids need to watch, So anyway, that was great. They felt very special. Okay. I'm going to skip this, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions. But let me just say, if you want to know how you can help us, the answer is listen to our podcast, follow us on social media, but also send us high school kids who belong with us, okay? People who are going to be leaders in your communities eventually and would really benefit from the sort of training that we offer. Please send them to us. We promise you we'll send them back. Okay, we're not trying to send them to Washington. We're trying to send them right back to you. Okay, yes, you had a question, Mayor.